let's get started. I know I don't want to take any more time than we need to with our panelists. They're very generous with their time. So welcome to the 7th Municipal Golf Network webinar put on by the National Links Trust. My name is Bill Smith. I'm co-founder of National Links Trust. I want to welcome everyone this afternoon or morning on the West Coast to this event. I'm really excited. I lived in San Francisco for a brief amount of time, but it was a I had a good time there back in 2000, and probably didn't take advantage of the golf courses as much as I should have. So this is really neat. I think what we're going to dive into is an important project, not just for golf in San Francisco, but really across the country. And I'm interested in learning more. So I'm going to get to the introductions here, and we'll get off and running. First, I want to introduce Dan Burke. Dan has served as the CEO of the First Tee of San Francisco for the past 10 years. Prior to that, he was the PGA head professional at Lake Merced Golf Club for 15 years. Next up is Josh Lewis. Josh is a partner at Gradeville and Hertzig Management Group. I hope I got the pronunciations there more or less correct. A consulting firm that provides agronomic assessment, pre-construction planning, and project management in the Western United States. Josh is a former superintendent with more than 25 years of golf maintenance experience, whose roles and projects include serving as the superintendent at Chambers Bay Golf Course and managing the grow-in of Bandon Trails and the renovations at Pasatiempo Golf Club. Jay Blasi, who some of you who maybe attended the NLT Symposium on Municipal Golf will know well, grew up playing municipal golf in Madison, Wisconsin, and has worked on numerous municipal projects in his 20-plus year design career. Jay got his start with Robert Trent Jones II in 2001 and served as project architect for the design of Chambers Bay, site of the 2015 U.S. Open, the Patriot in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Siebel Varsity Training Complex at Stanford University. He created Jay Blasi Design in 2012 and has led major renovation redesigns at Century World in Wisconsin, Santa Ana Country Club in Orange County, California, and Lakeside Country Club in Houston. His latest municipal design is what we're going to get into today, which is the transformation of Golden Gate Park Golf Course in San Francisco. And so, guys, welcome to the webinar, and thank you very much for taking time to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Dan, I'm going to start with you. Can you give us a little bit of the lay of the land in San Francisco? Talk about the different courses that the public can access.
Yeah, I mean, as many people know, San Francisco is a great golf destination, certainly on the private side, but it also is a great destination on the public side. I mean, the city and county of San Francisco has multiple great facilities, mostly, the anchor properties, obviously TPC Harding Park, which recently held the PGA Championship. Some people are familiar with Sharp Park, the Great Mackenzie that sits on the beach in Pacifica, and fewer probably know about Glen Eagles, which is a cool little nine-hole course in the middle of the city. Lincoln Park, which sits overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge, and then this cool little 9-hole par 3 Golden Gate Park golf course. So the city has great offerings, for public. In this particular case, this is a great 9-hole par 3 course that's operated by the First Tee of San Francisco.
Jay, maybe you can talk a little bit about the history of Golden Gate Park Golf Course. I know, the park, the Golden Gate Park itself was laid out by Frederick Law Olmsted, I believe, or if not his son. And how did the golf course come to be? And tell us a little bit about the history.
So the golf course was developed right around 1950, came in. The western part of the park was all sand dunes, back to the 1800s. And so golf was booming during the 30s and 40s in San Francisco. And I think Dan probably has a little bit more background on the name of the newspaper writer who was urging the city to build more golf. And so ultimately they ended up building the 9-hole par 3 Golden Gate Park golf course. Jack Fleming designed the golf course, and it sits on the very western edge of Golden Gate Park, so just a few hundred yards away from the Pacific Ocean. And again, The land is great. It's about 20-25 acres in terms of the site, with great topography, and there's all that sand underneath. Unfortunately, when they built the golf course, they kind of had soil that they put on top of that sand, and so but the golf course has been there again since right around 1950, and has served the community well for 70 plus years. It's been the spot in San Francisco where many golfers get their start. If you're a local San Franciscan, that's probably where you'll play your first round of golf.
Yeah. And Dan, when did the first tee, I guess, take over Golden Gate Park for their use?
Yeah, so going back even a little further, Sandy Tatum started the first tee of San Francisco, and it really evolved out of the renovation of Harding Park around 2000. As Sandy led kind of a crusade to upgrade Harding Park, which had kind of gone into a state of disrepair over the years. And ultimately, the first tee of San Francisco morphed out of that agreement between the city and county of San Francisco, the PGA Tour, etc. So fast forward, a decade of first tee of San Francisco was on a rocket ship of growth, and the leadership led by Tatum kind of realized that getting access to green grass golf courses for the kids in the program, in the long term could be a problem. And so ultimately, to solve that problem, they strategized, well, if we could actually operate one of the city's golf courses, that would be the best strategy and way to ensure that access would be there for the programs and the kids as time went on. And ultimately, First Tee of San Francisco became the operator of Golden Gate Park Golf Course in about 2013, and we've been the operator there ever since. It's worked very well. We control the access. The community enjoys us being there. It's been a great, marriage between us, the city, and the community. And ultimately, as the lease expired after 7 years, and unfortunately the clubhouse had burned in a fire, we kind of thought internally, like, hey, we want to stay there for the long term. It's a great program location for us. The city was getting around to rebuilding the clubhouse as the lease expired. And ultimately, we strategized, if we're going to stay there another 10 or 15 years, we might as well look at the possibility of upgrading the golf facilities. The irrigation system was old, a lot of deferred maintenance. And if we were going to stay there, we wanted to, have a discussion with the city about upgrading the facility, which we did, and worked for several years, the past few years, to come up with a new agreement that, one, upgraded the property from an agronomic perspective, new irrigation, and secured a potential long-term lease of 15 years so we can operate it with the ultimate goal of maintaining that access as we continue to grow with underserved kids, programs for underserved kids in the community. And that's kind of where we're at today.
I've got a lot to dive into there, but I take a step back. How many kids does First Tee of San Francisco service, and how many different facilities do you guys operate at, with the understanding that obviously Golden Gate seems like it's your sort of flagship, and maybe you do most of your programming there?
Yeah, without getting into too much detail, First Tee of San Francisco has grown into a pretty robust organization. We have a massive partnership with San Francisco Unified School District and other school districts in the community, where First Tee's brought to their schools as kind of the first tier of programming. That's in upwards of about 15,000 kids a year. We then kind of transition them into after school programs and weekend programs and year-round programs at multiple facilities, with Harding Park being the main hub. Golden Gate Park is a great program location for us. We also built a facility at an inner city middle school in 2009, another thing that Tatum kind of led, which still to this day is really the only golf facility at a municipal school playground in America. And then, we have more intentions of expanding down the peninsula. So it's a very robust program. The community and the donor base has been, on board from day one, and it's allowed us to use capital to build these really unique programs for the underserved kids in San Francisco. And Golden Gate Park ultimately is a critical part of that long-term strategy As Jay mentioned, it's there's no better place in San Francisco for a kid that's 7 or 8, from an underserved or low income area to start a journey with golf than this place at Golden Gate Park Golf Course.
Um, you mentioned the end result. You guys have a 15-year lease. You have the go ahead to do this project, but I think a lot of people who are tuned in today might want to get more into the details of how that came about. There are a lot of people from different communities who want to do something similar, who are looking for a little bit of a roadmap or some advice about how to navigate a public-private partnership. So, Dan, can you dive in a little bit further and let us know kind of how it came to be, and what were the pitfalls, and were there any keys to the success, a path forward?
Well, dating back from the beginning, we've really been a strategic partner of San Francisco Rec and Park, dating to our starting point, around 2002 at Harding Park. We have our own facilities there. We've been a tenant of the Park and Rec for a long time. They have a real understanding of the value of what we're doing in the community. That gives us, credibility and leverage. And so, for us to operate one of their facilities made a lot of sense for them. I mean, we're deep ties with them. It is, a unique space, right? Having a nonprofit in the community partner with a municipality to manage golf, to bring golf to people, it can be challenging. Ultimately, the city of San Francisco values what we do. In a lot of cases, I mean, using private money to upgrade their facilities is possible, and it has happened in multiple facilities within the Rec and Park, their tennis facility, as an example. But really, it takes time, it takes diligence, patience, because navigating those waters of bureaucracy can be challenging, especially for private entities such as a nonprofit that is supported by donors in the community. A lot of transparency, but ultimately in this new lease agreement, we got to a place of the following. One, we're willing to invest millions of dollars to secure access for our kids in the long term. The city leaned in to upgrade labor, equipment, deferred maintenance, and those things are in this long-term agreement that give us some leverage to ensure that our investment in this property is going to be maintained to a good standard in the future. The Park and Rec has shown at Harding Park that they are capable of taking care of a world-class facility. It's not always to the standard of some of the private clubs in the neighborhood, but they're also very busy facilities. And so resources aren't unlimited. They are, there's a cap on resources, but that's part of the discussion we have. But private and public partnerships are possible. It takes leadership, passion, and patience. But great things can happen that really are ultimately for the community benefit.
Yeah. If you can you talk a little bit about how the lease works? Obviously, it sounds like the maintenance of the golf course post rehab will stay with Parks and Rec. Greens fees, I assume, are going to be paid to you guys, and some sort of rev share with the city, or how does it work? If you you don't have to spell it out dollar by dollar, but if you could give us a little bit of the broad strokes.
Yeah, ultimately, we're a tenant, we pay rent, we are in revenue sharing with the city on green fees and other parts of the revenue. There is specific language related to the maintenance of the golf course and the standards that they need to abide by. There's actually fiscal incentive for the city to maintain it well. So it is unique. It is public record. People can look at it. It's a very big document. But ultimately, by investing into the capital part of the golf course, new irrigation, agronomically more sustainable, all these great things that are a win, we have a pretty good fiscal relationship in that lease that ensures we're not going to lose money. We want it to be a prosperous thing for both the city and us. And that lease, to the best we could get it to, ensures, the long-term health of the facility for the community.
Did you have someone sort of on the inside, for lack of a better term? Was there someone on the government side who, clearly saw the benefit of this and was a champion for you? Talking to other communities, it seems like that certainly helps with the process. If there's someone who's already in the bureaucracy who gets it.
Well, a couple things. Phil Ginsburg's been the long-term general manager of the Rec and Park. He values First Tee. I think the Park and Rec values their golf properties now more than they ever have. I mean, it's a massive entity with couple $100 million budget, and the golf aspect of the Rec and Park is not a big portion of the overall Rec and Park. But with the success of Harding, the renovation, the major championships, the events that have come to San Francisco, their lens and their understanding of the value of their properties, the golf properties, is more heightened than ever. They see the upside to upgrade these facilities from a community perspective and a fiscal perspective. Mark Buell, who was the longtime chairman of the Park and Rec Commission, is a golfer. He loves golf. Mayor Ed Lee, while he was still alive and he was the mayor, valued golf. So there's definitely constituents within the bureaucracy that value golf. It's not a perfect world. San Francisco is a very left-leaning city where golf, isn't the top priority, as the problems in the city. But ultimately, there was enough stakeholders within the Rec and Park and city governance to understand that this is the right thing to do, and partnering with an entity like First Tee of San Francisco, whose goal isn't to grow golf. That's kind of a byproduct, right? We're trying to change kids' lives from the underserved communities of San Francisco. So those synergies working together made for what ultimately we hope is just a great blueprint for other communities to look at as a public-private partnership to upgrade this golf course.
Jay and Josh, thanks for your patience here. We're gonna get to the actual golf course here in a sec, but I wanted to ask a couple more questions on the public-private partnership, and then also you just mentioned, Dan, about the underserved communities, and you've been doing this for a while now. Can you talk a little bit about outreach? Because obviously you need to get the kids to the golf course or get them interested in participating.
Jay and Josh are used to me talking all day, so I think they're going to be all right. Ultimately, First Tee's worked very well as a youth development organization because it's kind of come up with good strategies to get to kids. And in particular, as I mentioned, we go to the school districts, right? If you're in one of the 72 elementary schools in San Francisco Unified School District, which serves the lion's share of underserved kids, you're going to get First Tee as part of your PE curriculum every spring, right? So that's how we throw a big blanket on the community. They value what we do so much as they've let us bus kids from their schools to our facilities at Harding and Golden Gate Park and Viz Valley. And that's really how we throw a big blanket on the underserved community, get them exposed to First Tee and golf, and then ultimately build out programs based at these green grass facilities where they can, learn the great values of golf, like honesty and integrity and, all the things that most golfers have learned about life on the golf course. We want to instill those values in kids. And really, Tatum, dating back 20 years ago, that made perfect sense to him, right? Teach kids values from this great game. So our outreach is very deep in the community based on our relationship with schools and community-based organizations. Some kids in San Francisco can't get transported to Golden Gate Park or Harding Park. So we've had to really use risk capital to develop year-round programs that include transportation, college prep, all really our motto is any resource we identify to get to a kid 23 and workforce ready, we're going to throw that at them, whether that's scholarships for college, etc. So like these facilities serve as kind of the hubs to build, where we've built these great year-round programs to impact the underserved kids in our community.
Right. That's great. So before we move on from the private-public partnership and get to the golf course, any pitfalls, any you guys have been doing this for 10 years at Golden Gate and have obviously sort of ramped it up for this project. Is there anything, any downside that you see or things that people should be very cognizant of if they're trying to launch something like this in their own community?
Yeah, I mean, understanding bureaucracy and city government is a help, right? It's different than the Olympic Club in Lake Merced in San Francisco, where the membership sees something or identifies something they want, they just do it, right? Whereas there tends to be more process in place, more restrictions, less resources. So having an understanding of what that playing field looks like in advance can only help kind of the transparency and figuring out how to solve problems when they do arise. But it is a definite different playing field than, say, a private club environment, dealing with municipal governments, um, restricted budgets, those types of things. But this ultimately proves that, it is possible, right? Harding was a great blueprint. This is another kind of Harding Light project where um, the governments can see the value of their property. It's not always right in front of them. In this case, they have a deep understanding of the value this golf course brings not only to the local community but to the underserved community. And that leverage and that understanding has to be at play, not just simply the golf course and like, hey, we're going to put in irrigation and we're going to make it more golf friendly. There has to be more value added into it for it to make sense and ultimately to get to the goal line.
Very well said. And now we're going to get to the golf. Uh, no, but I joke. But Jay, Josh, when did you guys get it brought into this project?
Well, I had the opportunity to help Dan and the first tee of San Francisco. Dan mentioned that one of their hub facilities is at Harding Park. And for those familiar with Harding Park, there is the first tee facility to the left of the first hole, which is essentially kind of a driving range facility. And for the PGA Championship, that was going to be used for tents and all the infrastructure of that big championship. And so because of that facility needed to be redone. And so I had the opportunity to work with Dan and the first tee to kind of redo that facility, make sure that the programming there and the design there was set up to maximize the potential for their programs at Harding Park. So that was back in 2020, 2021. And I think it was even maybe a few years before that I had gone up and looked at maybe a little chipping or putting green up at Golden Gate Park. And once you get on property at Golden Gate Park, you immediately fall in love with everything and kind of see the potential was there. So we've been kind of dreaming about it for a while, but after we got the facility at Harding Park set up and we knew that the lease negotiations for the lease extension were going on, we started to dive in and study about what could be done, how you could do it, how you could execute it. Dan mentioned that the clubhouse had burned down in a fire and that the city was rebuilding that clubhouse or building a new clubhouse. And that has been ongoing for quite some time. And that was scheduled to reopen towards the end of this year. And that was known years in advance. And so we kind of took that opportunity and said, hey, if there's ever the right time to work on the golf course, there's some real synergy there while the clubhouse is being redone. Let's try to do them both at the same time and marry that up.
And how about Josh? When were you brought in?
So I think Jay initially reached out and we kind of chatted about the project. August, I think, 23 or August 22, sorry. And that kind of moved pretty rapidly after that, put me in touch with Dan, kind of talked about where things were at, started kind of pulling project together at that point, late Q3, mostly Q4 of 22, ahead of a hopeful approval for this long-term lease agreement, which was supposed to take place early 2023. So I think we ended up getting approval somewhere around the first week of February and started construction first week of March.
Right. Jay, when you first went out to Golden Gate or went out to look at the chipping green, what did you see out there that was working well? What did you notice that clearly needed upgrading? By all accounts, right, this was a well-used facility.
Absolutely right. This has been a treasured asset in the community for decades, and it was a thriving operation. There were plenty of people playing the golf course and having a great time. And when you first get there, and depending on where you're coming from, just the drive to the golf course. I live 45 minutes south, and you drive up and you kind of come up over a dune, and you're along the coastline there for the last half mile before you turn past the windmill and go to the golf course. So even the sense of arrival, that you're in someplace really, really special. And then obviously Golden Gate Park as a whole is one of the great parks in all the United States, or maybe even all the world. So you're in someplace special, and then you get on property, and the terrain, the setting is just magical. There's big giant cypress trees. The ground for golf is ideal. There's probably about 35 feet of elevation change, and it's kind of rolling, and the way that the golf course meanders across the property is really beautiful. It kind of takes you on a wonderful journey to some high spots, and then you kind of dive back down, and you're kind of tucked away in the trees, and then you pop back up out. So the setting, the land was really spectacular, and you could tell that it had, and you knew that the sand was underneath. So it had all of the ingredients for great golf. I think the things that jumped out that you said, hey, there's some things here that are maybe holding things back. Pretty much the entire facility was kind of maintained at rough height, maybe 2 inches. And so knowing that the vast majority of golfers who were out there were true beginners, you can imagine that, if you top a ball or don't hit it well, it's only going 10 feet or whatever in the rough everywhere. So you could see that was challenging, as with many golf courses, over time, probably been overgrown. The corridors had gotten tighter and tighter with the overgrowth of vegetation. So you notice some of those things. Another thing that really jumped out was there was one set of tees. And so you've got all these people playing from the same spot, when in reality, 125-yard hole for a beginner that's all rough, that can be really, really challenging. So there were things that you noticed in terms of, how the ball would react. There was no real roll. Corridors had gotten narrow. The greens were all kind of small, simple circles and whatnot. So there were a number of things that stood out that said, hey, there's probably an opportunity to, if you're going to invest in the infrastructure, to make sure that we could address some of those playability challenges as well, and really maximize the potential of the site.
So when you started to get into the planning where this looked like this might happen, what were some of the constraints that you had? You obviously didn't have an unlimited budget or free reign to do anything. What were those constraints?
Again, you're in Golden Gate Park, and so from a agronomic standpoint, I'll let Josh speak to some of the what you can and can't do agronomically. But from our standpoint, we knew that we wanted to try and address the playability. We were not going to be allowed to reroute the golf course and just start over and put holes wherever we wanted. So we were going to be working within the footprint that was there, which was great. The holes, again, fit the land very well. We did change the sequencing of the holes, and we renumbered the holes, and we thought that made a lot more sense. Ironically, we went back to what was there originally. But the way that the holes meandered across the property worked very well. So that was the biggest constraint, was just knowing that we were going to keep the holes. We weren't just going to be moving them willy-nilly. And then from a tree management standpoint, there were certain areas we were very fortunate that we were able to kind of open up the corridors and get rid of some non-native vegetation and some of that overgrowth. But the way that the golf course sits in the overall park, there were some boundaries on the edge of the golf course that we didn't have access to thin back some of the trees, and so we were limited by that. And then the last kind of challenge that was out there wasn't necessarily a true constraint, but a challenge was just the soil that was on top of the sand. That was going to be something we knew we wanted to get down to those native sands, and so making sure that we could get rid of that soil that was on top that was usually 6 inches to a foot deep. That was one of those kind of challenges, not necessarily a straight constraint, but one of the challenges we needed to overcome.
So what did you do with the soil?
Well, we did scrape it, and it was kind of an adventure because California had been in a drought for 7 years or whatever, but this past winter we got a lot of rainfall, and as Josh mentioned, we kind of started at the beginning of March, and sure enough, everything came down at once right as we were trying to strip some of that stuff off. So there was a spot on property adjacent to the number 2 tee box, the number 5 tee box, and the number 7 tee box where there was kind of a big hole. So we were able to scrape that material and get it, lose it on site, and just kind of create a little bit of a buffer dune over there. But we joked throughout the project that we felt like we were in the movie Shawshank Redemption, where we were just trying to lose dirt out of our pant leg anywhere that we could, just to get rid of it and hide it off the golf course, just to get down to those sands.
And Josh, from the best was I guess was the topsoil brought in 1950 to create a better growing surface? I mean, I without probably irrigation or very good irrigation, I'm sure they thought they needed to retain some moisture. Is that where it originated from, or?
To the best of my research, it starts back at the beginning of the park. They came in originally, as Jay referenced, the whole area has a name called the Great Sand Dunes. So going all the way back into like San Francisco Golf Club, Lake Merced, just this massive sand dune complex. And so the vast majority of the park is built on sand. When they originally planted it, they had a really hard time getting the plants to establish basically in the sand. And so at that point in history, the fix for that was to bring in topsoil. So they brought in a foot of topsoil basically over the whole place, replanted the park to establish the plants. And to the best of our knowledge, that's kind of where it started. Of course, when Jay called me and said, "Hey, we've got this really cool site I want you to come look at," and I'm pretty sure it's all dune sand 500 yards from the beach, we both kind of, our faces lit up. We knew if we could get rid of that soil, we'd have something pretty special to work at. So we were really glad that when we stripped that soil, it was actually sand.
Yeah. And then, agronomically, decision was to go with fescue. Do I have that right?
Yeah. So there was a lot of conversation around, we knew obviously going into this that, again, golf course is in Golden Gate Park. It's in the city of San Francisco. It's near the beach, all of these environmental constraints. And we wanted to make sure, knowing some of the challenges the city was up against already with very limited fungicide, herbicide use. They want to limit their fertilizer inputs and things like that. We wanted to put what we believe to be the most sustainable turf for that site out there. And so that was the biggest driver, was reduced water use, effectively no herbicide or fungicide use, and a walking only site, well drained. It all kind of lined up for fine fescue.
Yeah. Dan, maybe you could talk a little bit about what you guys were looking for in the golf course and the design of the golf course from a first tee perspective. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Jay touched on it a little bit, right? There was only 1 tee box on every hole. So whether you're a scratch golfer or you're an 8-year-old playing your first round, you were playing from the same place. The golf course was only mowed once a week in the old standards. So one, much more playability, the ball on the ground moving, variety for different locations, for different levels of ability to play. We also wanted to ensure that it still had its kind of community vibe, right? We didn't want to forget about the people that are playing there every day, which is a different constituency than, say, people that go to play Sharp Park and Harding. So we did our homework with that because we wanted it to be fun, friendly, and I think Jay captured those factors brilliantly. I think you're going to have people whether you're a scratch golfer coming to town to play the Olympic Club, or whether you're a 9-year-old little girl who's going to play her first round carrying her clubs. I think you're going to have a great time no matter what your age and your ability level. The ball's going to move. It's going to be fun. So that's really what, from a design perspective, we were really trying to capture, is just an assortment of fun, knowing that players of all abilities are going to enjoy the property. It's certainly agronomically more friendly. It's more environmentally friendly. And then, removing some of this overgrown brush and other things that have been there for decades, I mean, have opened up views of the Pacific, the cliff house that really is just going to be transformational for people that haven't been there before and people that are used to being there every day. It's pretty stunning from just a visual perspective.
Well, Jay, how did you do? Did you create a fun golf course?
Well, again, as we've talked about, we were blessed to have such a great canvas, and we were also blessed to have a great team. Josh obviously was able to help guide us and pull together the different aspects. We had 3 different shapers who are wildly talented, and each brought something to the table as well. So again, just trying to hit the goals that Dan outlined in terms of variety and playability. I think from a pure architecture standpoint, we wanted to bring out a little bit of try to capture the sense of place, knowing the history that the whole area was sand dunes. We wanted to expose some of those sandy areas. And so what was kind of wall to wall turf at rough height, now we're all fairway height from tee to green. And then in areas that are out of play, we strategically took some spots and then exposed that sand. And so we think that will help really enhance the overall look and feel. Dan touched upon the idea of removing some of the brush and the overgrowth, and what that's done for the views, whether it's seeing the city, and you get this great juxtaposition that here you are in this amazing oasis in the city. So you're seeing the city buildings and the Pacific Ocean out in the distance, and yet you're in this kind of magical park with fine turf and exposed sand and cypress trees. So it's a really special place, and we just tried to match the design to what was out there. Again, we wanted to have bigger greens with more hole location options, and the areas around the greens, we wanted to have interesting contours that would help kind of feed the ball to the hole wherever possible, and things like that. So lots and lots of variety and shot options. If you're a beginning golfer, if you're out there for fun, you could play this whole golf course with a putter if you wanted to. There's a couple of holes, number 2 and 8, where we'll encourage people to use a putter off the tee, short little downhill holes. So again, just very, very blessed to have a perfect canvas to work with and a great team to do it with.
I think we have some slides, right? Should we?
Yeah, I think Andrew's got a
the right
couple
time
of
to pull
them.
those up? I don't know.
Yeah, so here are a couple of shots you can see of some of the holes. In the top left there, that's hole number 4, which is a little par 3, kind of stretches out to maybe 125 or so. And that setting was already there, right? So kind of a natural punch bowl setting. We just kind of expanded the green a bit, made sure that the contours around the green really worked and funneled the ball to the hole. We think this will be a really, really fun spot for golfers. Our hope is that there'll be lots of hole-in-ones in that area. The one to the right of that, hole number 6, that might be the biggest transformation of all. That hole was really, really overgrown on both sides, and you can see a big kind of sandy blowout behind the green there, kind of in the back left. That was all shrubbery, kind of shrubs that are 5 to 10 or 15 feet tall. And what that meant was that, any golfer who hit a really bad shot was losing their ball in the shrubs. But it also meant, it just kind of suffocated the hole. You didn't have the long view. And it was blocking all the views from that top ridge line. Now, if you stand on that top ridge line, you can see the cliff house, the city, and the Pacific Ocean. So again, that one's probably a little bit bigger transformation there. that hole, you can see those sand scrapes or sandy blowout areas. They kind of look impactful, but they're not really in play. The one on the right is kind of just in front of the tee box, and the one on the left is behind the green going up the hill. Down in the bottom left is the 7th hole, another kind of short little downhill par 3. And here we were able to create like a little boomerang green. That's the only formal bunker on the golf course. And so had a lot of fun with my little 5-year-old son out there during construction and his little plastic shovel helping to build that bunker. So that one's neat. You know, if you're on the front left edge, you can putt over to the right hand side. You know, there's lots of fun contours to use there to get the ball to chase. And then in the bottom right is our 8th hole. And again, as Dan mentioned, you can have some views of the city now, seeing the VA hospital up on top of the hill. That's a little one, about 85 yards down the hill, and set up so that you can putt. And again, the team did a brilliant job of kind of exposing some of those little sand scrapes in the background and off to the right that add a lot visually, but hopefully aren't really that much in play.
So that's the only formal bunkers on 7. There were in the prior course, there were a few bunkers. You've eliminated bunkers technically, but added sand or added sand scrapes.
Yeah, that's correct. So like our 9th hole is a longer par 3, can stretch to about 180. And on that hole, there were 2 bunkers, maybe 25 yards short of the green, that really pinched the entrance. So the entrance was only maybe 5 or 10 yards wide. So in a situation like that, those bunkers, you know, probably weren't in play for a really good player, but they were punishing a lot of beginner golfers or average golfers. And so that's the type of thing where we studied the golf course and saw, okay, how are those bunkers impacting who plays out here? And it wasn't necessarily the relationship that we wanted. So those bunkers went away. Some other bunkers on the golf course went away. And we tried to use ground contours as a way to give people a little bit more room to play golf if you're a beginner, and then something more to think about if you're a top player.
Josh, can you just talk a little bit about how the taking out of the invasives and the sort of understory shrub that choked off a lot of will improve the agronomics of the turf here going forward?
Yeah, no, it's so the site in general, I mean, anybody that knows anything about San Francisco, especially out towards the water, it's a very foggy, dark, damp condition most of the summer. So the shoulder seasons are actually the best weather. But when you get into July, August, early September, it's fog down to the ground, high of 52, and not a lot of air movement. So by opening up a lot of these understories and things like that, we just try to maximize really sunlight and air movement in a typically low light environment. It's, we still have a couple pockets on the golf course, like Jay referenced, we, butting up next to other parts of the park where we didn't have the latitudes to get a lot of the underbrush handled or pruning of dense stands of trees, things like that. We still have some shade conditions and stuff that are negatively impacting pockets, but overall it's worlds better than what we had prior to, and I think it'll lend itself to a lot better turf conditions moving forward.
Great. Let's see. I just I know I'm excited to go out there and play it. It looks awesome. It really does. It looks like an absolutely wonderful place to spend an hour or two hitting fun golf shots and enjoying being outside with friends in a beautiful environment, which is I think a lot of us value about the game of golf. So kudos to all 3 of you for getting this across the finish line. I guess we're not quite at the finish line. We've still got a little bit of growing left. Where are we in the process, and what's the plan going forward?
Yeah, we're really close as it relates to the golf course. I mean, at this point, it's a lot of detail work. It's with any growing, especially fine fescue, there's always, 2 or 3 steps forward, half step backward. There's a lot of positives to fescue as a turf. One of the negatives is traffic. And so, managing that traffic through the growing as we bring heights down, things like that, balancing with fertility and, water and things like that is really important. So we've got, little areas that we're working on still just to get density where we want. Greens are all pretty good. One of the beauties of this property is understanding the business model, understanding the primary demographic and the people that are going to play the golf course. That gave Jay and our shaping team a lot of latitude as it relates to building really cool, fun, maybe in some cases would be considered, bold contouring. Knowing that our target green speeds aren't going to be, outrageously fast. 9 to 10 on the stent meter is about the max for this property. So we were able to marry some really neat contouring on greens, that if you're trying to run greens at 12 or 13 on the stent meter, obviously wouldn't work. So I'd say green speeds are somewhere between 8 and 9 right now. So we're looking for about another foot of green speed just to get a lot of those shapes to work the right way. And then just working on firmness, root density. We want the golf course to play bouncy and fun and firm and fast, and people to get a real taste of what, in our opinion, golf should be, which is a game played on the ground.
Yeah.
Josh,
So Jan, what are we looking at for opening?
That's a Dan Burke question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Will, the golf course could be played today if it was open to the public for sure. The clubhouse construction has gone, as a lot of construction does. There's been some supply chain issues. And so we're not going to open the golf course until the clubhouse is done. That's probably trending somewhere around the first of the year, maybe a week or two into January. The upside to that is it allows Josh to integrate the city maintenance folks into the property, allows, time, to, more time with no golfers is good time on the grow-in side. Ultimately, we're excited to get it open so the public can see it, start generating some revenue instead of just having only expense. But we're also going to be cognizant of how busy it's going to be when it opens, right? There's a lot of pent up demand, not only locally, but all the hype about how amazing this golf course is, which it absolutely is. There's going to be significant demand. We're not going to be able to probably handle all the demand. We want to make sure the golf course gets off to a good start, that we're not inundating it, with too many rounds. Let the city learn how to maintain it. Hopefully have good interactions between us as well. But we hope to have it open in early January to the public is the answer today.
Great. One of the questions that someone reached out to us beforehand, and you've talked about the demand, and Josh, you referenced the cost, and what is the plan going forward for pricing greens fees? How does that compare to before? Here at NLT, we are very concerned about affordable and accessible golf, and clearly this is going to be accessible. And it looks like an incredible project, and certainly here we hope that it's going to be affordable. So I'm just wondering what's the plan, and what were the things you guys considered when setting pricing going forward?
Well, a couple things. One, there's very specifics related to the code within the park, the park and rec at the green fees at their facilities, right? They're very restrictive related to resident rates, et cetera. Those are kept arbitrarily low and protected on a year-to-year basis. So operators don't have just free run of making green fees what they want, especially for the residents. That said, the non-resident rates, which historically is about a third of the play at this property, we can price them really where we feel the market is. We kind of starting at maybe a $40 non-resident weekday rate and a $50 weekend rate, which we think is very reasonable in San Francisco. That's a starting point. We may consider dynamically pricing those based on supply and demand, which is what they do at Harding Park, and that seems to have worked, successfully. But this is a community asset, right? And I think the lion's share of people are going to be kids and community people, local San Francisco. So those rates are going to stay very low, which, are a senior resident is probably going to pay $18 or $19 to play the golf course. A city resident, 35-year-old's probably going to pay, $25 to play the golf course, which by, by San Francisco standards is still very, very affordable. There's also great food and beverage at the facility. So there should be ample, revenue for us in the city to make it viable fiscally while still maintaining the golf course at a very good standard. That's kind of the long-term vision that we're projecting.
Great. I'm sure people are happy to hear that, and that's really good to hear. I'm going to open up to Q&A. We've got a couple in the chat box, which I'll go through. There's one that I don't know the history of it, so I probably should stay away from it. But was there any consideration given to adding a bison paddock on the 9th hole? There's got to be something here, so I want to know what the story is. You got some chuckles. Maybe I should have stayed away.
I'll take that. The Golden Gate Park is one of the best urban parks in the world, right? Not just in the United States. I mean, you have your Central Park folks, but you also have your Golden Gate Park folks. But there's a paddock with bison that's probably a driver and a 5-iron away from Golden Gate Park Golf Course. And I don't know how many bison live in there, but they have ample space there. I don't think we're going to let them get anywhere too close to the golf course. There's probably other concerns beyond bison of making sure the property stays, safe and other things. So that was definitely worth a chuckle.
Good. I wasn't sure if I was weighing into, bison poop or not, but it's good.
Josh was concerned about, coyote damage on the golf course during growing. Can you only imagine bison damage on a golf course?
Yeah.
during growing?
So I encourage, if anyone's got a question, to please type it in the Q&A. Corey, I think we've covered your question about the historical sand dunes and how they influence the updates. And these next two are sort of part and parcel. And maybe I'll start with you, Dan, and each one of you guys can say a different hole, your favorite hole in the course and why. And obviously we don't want to go too deep, but
mine is number 8, which is about a 90-yard par 3 down the hill. Obviously, all the holes are par 3s, but as that picture depicts, when you used to be on this location before, looking down, you didn't see any of the city. And the overgrown stuff that's been taken out and some of the dead stuff that's been removed, all of a sudden now opens up this view where you see the beautiful homes within, the Richmond district, and you see the VA, and you almost get a little view of the corner of Lincoln Park. So it reminds you that you are in one of the major metropolitan cities in the world, which I think is a great reminder. Irony is, from there you can still hear the waves breaking, which are probably 100, 200 yards to your left in that location. But that for me is the best location on the property.
Josh, you got to pick a different hole.
Well, yeah, Dan, my favorite hole to play is 8. It's wonderful, but my favorite hole from my own perspective is 9, because as Jay referenced, we had this wonderful plan that we put together coming in, had the golf course construction flow all figured out perfectly, and then somebody coined the term bomb cyclone and atmospheric river, and we seem to get a lot of those right when we started. So we buried quite a bit of equipment on the 9th hole, which was our starting point. It was our irrigation point of connection, and everything was going to kind of work off of that. And there were definitely periods in March where I would call Jay and go, I don't know if we're ever going to get off number 9. So now if you look at the 9th hole, it's beautiful. It's linksy. There's a great, sand feature kind of in front of the tees, off to the side of the tees, that we actually mined quite a bit of sand out to build that green out of and bring that green elevation up. And it's just a really pretty hole in the low light. And it was a hole I never thought we'd get built. So.
Well, Jay, you got a choice of seven remaining.
Well, I'm gonna cheat, so I'll talk about number 6. I think we've seen that earlier, and I think Andrew posted the kind of before and after just a minute ago. But that's one that we were really able to open up. It's one of the longer holes, plays uphill. It's got the big sand dune behind it, and a really interesting green complex. Probably one of the 2 biggest greens on the golf course, but lots of interesting hole locations there. And if you go to the top of that, if you were to stand on top of that sand dune in the background there, that's the high point of the property. That's where number 2, 5, and number 7 tees all meet. And that spot has kind of a panoramic view to the ocean and the city. And you see a windmill in the distance. And so that's kind of a spot where I'm really hopeful that people will congregate, as they play their round, and maybe you're hearing people make a hole in one on number 7 and high-fiving with people who are on the tee at number 2 or things like that. And I've been joking from the start that I want to have a little lemonade stand up there. I think I could retire early. That will be a spot to hang out. And the other cool spot on the property for me is number 1 and number 4 share a green. We saw a picture earlier of the 4th green. That's the big kind of punch bowl, but that's actually combined with number 1 green. And you wouldn't think it being down in a punch bowl setting, but if you're on number 4 green, you can actually see the ocean from there as well. And there's an old snag that we kept kind of behind and to the right of the 4th green and to the right of the 1st green, and we kind of refer to that as Sandy's stump in honor of Sandy Tatum. So that's kind of a neat spot on the property as well.
Well, guys, I want to be very respectful of your time, and that's I think a nice place to end. So much of golf in San Francisco, I think, leads back to Sandy Tatum. He was an inspiration to many, and that's a really nice honor you've given him by naming the snag after him. And I really want to thank all of you for taking the time this afternoon to join us and tell us a little bit more about the project. And I can't wait to get out there and play it sometime in the new year. And congrats to all involved. And again, thank you very much for your time and wisdom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, Will. Really appreciate all that you and National Links Trust are doing. These are great, and can't thank you enough for your focus and highlight on municipal golf. So
Well,
thank you.
as you know, Jay, there's so many people across this country who care about municipal golf and what it can do for communities. And we're just trying to bring those people together to continue the conversation, share best practices. And again, thank you all for being part of that.
Yeah. One final thing, Will, if people have questions on the micro details of the lease we did put together, they're thinking about something along these lines, please reach out. Happy to share how things are put together.
That's great. And maybe Dan, maybe there's something we can put on our website and something like that. We can help share that information. It'd be great. Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.